Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Michael Wald. I'm a doctor of chiropractic with a board certification in nutrition. I'm a dietitian and sports nutritionist. I provide acupuncture and I'm a life coach. And I even have an MD diploma, although not an active medical license. So today's presentation is entitled Detox Deception. Does nutritionally oriented detoxification really work? And when my clients tell their regular physicians about the detoxification they're doing with me, those doctors are very concerned because they're thinking about alcohol detoxification. In the holistic field, when you mention detoxification, they're talking about these nutritional ways to detoxify things. So having said that, we're going to get into some practical information right away that you need to know. So if you just look at this particular chart, you'll see it says step 1, step 2, and waste products. The basic contention of this conversation is that there are two major phases of detox in the liver of human beings, phase 1 and phase 2. And the body will use phase 1 to take fat-soluble toxins in the body. By definition, those are toxins that are stored in fatty places, and turn them into water-soluble compounds so they can be eliminated either in the form of the urine, or some can exit the body through the skin. So phase 1 gathers these fat-soluble toxins, transforms them through various processes. Then that's fed into phase 2. In phase 2, they become water-soluble toxins, and then they're eliminated. Information, by the way, is for your educational purposes only. It is not meant as a substitute for sound medical or health advice. So let me start, though, by defining what detoxification is, and then I'll define what a toxin is. So detoxification is the body's natural process of neutralizing and eliminating toxins via a variety of organs, the liver, the kidneys, the skin, lungs, lymphatic system, and the colon. So, for example, if I wanted to promote elimination and detoxification of mercury in someone's body, I would want to promote that through the intestinal tract. I wouldn't want to promote that through the kidneys, simply because those other systems are not the primary ways that the body prefers to remove toxins. So if someone has a disease of various organs that are weak, you could use nutrition and natural ways of detoxing to push other pathways. So the liver, obviously, is the central organ involved in biochemical detoxification, especially phases 1 and phase 2, as I mentioned, I should say, for phase 1. And then let's say, for example, you have a mercury toxic issue. We would want to give you more N-acetylcysteine, which you don't see, well, you do see cysteine in here, because NAC is particularly good for binding or chelating, as we like to say, these metals. So, and then if you're detoxing, let's say, estrogens, we might have to add certain probiotics here and fibers, because estrogen prefers to be detoxed through the colon. So we must have all the nutrients from phase 1 and phase 2, and then we want to have whatever additional nutrients we need in adjusted doses for that person that are consistent with the toxin or toxins we want to remove. I should address you to my website at drmichaelwald.com. If you search for Detox Deception, you'll come up with an hour-long podcast on this where I go through these things in a lot more detail. So, in terms of these toxins, we know that they're any substance that can cause harm to cells or organs. And they could be either naturally occurring or not naturally occurring. And then there are toxins that are made in the body, endogenous toxins. And then there are toxins made outside of the body. Those are exogenous ones. So the endogenous, or ones created in the body, that would be those that are created by our, let's say, intestinal tract or excess hormones. And then the exogenous ones from our environments would include pesticides, fungicides, herbicides, heavy metals, for example, all toxins. And let me give you some specific environmental toxins. Now, all of the toxins we're exposed to, all of them, have to be dealt with through our phase 1 and phase 2. And by the way, I'm aware that there's a phase 3, and some of you may be criticizing why I'm not mentioning that. There's a lot more detail we could go into, but this I wanted to be a more than average, slightly detailed but practical initial conversation. So we have these bisphenols, which are from plastic containers, for example, even receipts that you get when you pay for something. And the phthalates from personal care products, pesticides, from produce, for example, grains, heavy metals, which we're getting from fish, old pipes, batteries, volatile organic compounds, or VOCs. We'll get those in paints and furniture and cleaning products. Mold mycotoxins, that's much more common than people realize in their basements and other places in their homes. We've got polychlorinated biphenyls from electrical equipment and old insulation, flame retardants, and air pollution, for example. And again, these phases in the liver must manage these. So at the very minimum, you want the basic nutrition, I'll keep saying this, and then you want additional nutrition based on the types of toxins, the amount of them, and the rest of your health. What other medications are you taking? What level of food adjustments are you willing to make? And other factors. So these fat-soluble toxins embed themselves in cell membranes and fatty tissues, like I mentioned earlier. The liver's detoxification then will transform these toxins through phase 1, which we said is the phase in which the body will gather up these fat-soluble toxins. Phase 2 is known as the conjugation pathways, where they are altered, the toxins are altered, and then they're made to be water-soluble. And then, of course, the body has to excrete these toxins through the renal system or the kidneys, through the urine, or through the use of bile, which is made by the liver in our feces, and also sweat in our breathing. And then, for example, with mercury, methyl mercury is fat soluble. It becomes conjugated, and with glutathione, that's glutathione conjugation. Okay, that's the second phase 2 pathway. And then they can be excreted in the bile and the urine once they're fat soluble. I hope you find this particular chart interesting. I'm just going to quickly go over these different fasting methods and tell you what's right and wrong about them. So, for example, fasting itself may support what's known as autophagy, but needs proper supervision. So, meaning fasting can help improve the aging of our cells, particularly when that's done right. And I do believe that that's true, because I've checked various biomarkers of laboratory tests as people were fasting, and they clearly became younger. And then there's colonics. Here's what I don't like about colonics. I get the fact that they're removing crap and other things out of your intestinal tract, but when you do a colonic procedure with a person that's not a medical provider, they are not trained in inserting devices in the rectal cavity into the intestine, so you risk rupture, you risk death. Also, when they put all this fluid and herbs and things like that in there, you're stretching the colon out, and you're causing a lot of debris in the colon. It's true, to be removed from the body, but you're also removing the mucociliary immune blanket, which is the covering on the inside of the intestinal tract, which contains immunoglobulin A's plus all kinds of other immunomolecules that could take months or years or never to come back. And the colonic therapy is stretching out the bowel wall and the two muscular layers in the intestinal lining. So you've got the bowel here, the muscular layers in the lining are weaker, so then you have less ability to contract. That's why people usually get stuck on these things, and they do 1, 2, 14 of these things in short records of time. You can just do vitamin C in a buffered powdered form with what I call a vitamin C flush. Check out my website at drmichaelwald.com for vitamin C flush, and it will cost you pennies to remove toxins from your colon, and you can strengthen the muscular layers with just vitamin C. And then there's juice cleanses. Obviously, they can offer a high level of nutrition, enzymes, antioxidants, but they should contain proteins, which will help the phase 2, like cysteine and glutathione, will help the, as I mentioned, the phase 2 process. And then we've got saunas, which promote sweating of some toxins, especially fat-soluble ones. We're not talking any real amounts here. You're not going to properly detoxify yourself with a sauna. It's more for relaxation. Then there's chelation therapy. Chelation is a term from the Latin claw, chelate, which is to bind to a toxin and eliminate it. So that's what you want to do for heavy metals. So, for example, N-acetylcysteine or NAC helps to bind to heavy metals, but it also promotes glutathione conjugation and cysteine conjugation, which are ways in which the body gets rid of these fat-soluble heavy metals by making them water-soluble and then having them be eliminated through the bile. And then there's dry brushing, which stimulates lymph, but it doesn't directly remove any toxins. And then there's coffee enemas, which I'm aware of, and I was aware of since a young teenager. There is the 50 cancer cures from the Mac Gershon Clinic that may still be around in Mexico. And they made coffee enemas a huge part of their anti-cancer plans there. But you need to be careful because, a couple of issues. I just answered this question for a client. You can cause electrolyte issues with with colon cleanses. You can damage the rectal area. You can introduce infections. You could have coffee or caffeine side effects. And there have been some reported deaths as well. So if you're going to do coffee enemas, they should be done under the supervision of a practitioner that knows what they're doing. And then herbal teas like dandelion and milk thistle, they can support liver function, although there's very little evidence because most teas don't really work for detoxification. The amounts of herbs in there are just too dilute. And then there's infrared therapy, which can support mitochondrial function, but there are better ways of doing that, such as exercise. And finally, for now, activated charcoal, which I would caution a person to take charcoal with any minerals, because the activated charcoal will bind to minerals and reduce their absorption. But what I like about charcoal is that if you take it every day away from foods and have some charcoal in your system, radiation that's passing through your body that passes through the charcoal, some will be absorbed. So it actually mitigates radiation exposure very, very cheaply. So just to reiterate a few things, when we're talking about testing, and if you're curious about your detoxification pathways, you can do what's known as a phase 1, phase 2 detoxification kit or panel, which can assess specifically how your phase 1 and phase 2 liver is working. I don't like to do that test, honestly, because the test requires you to consume certain substances that are challenging or triggers for the test and trigger phase 1 and phase 2, but these are not the foods and other influences in a person's life. So I usually will just assume that people need help with phase 1 and phase 2, and I don't waste several $100s of their money on that particular test unless they want it. And then measuring various liver enzymes, that's obviously important here because the liver has over 500 functions that we know of, and we need to know how those enzymes are doing. And sometimes I'll do a urinary organic acid test, which is checking something known as the organic acid or Krebs cycle pathway in the body, which is an energy-producing pathway, which needs to be working for the proper detoxification energy. And then there's, if I suspect that someone's having heavy metal issues, then I will, of course, measure heavy metals. If I think they're having hormonal issues, I will do that. If they have other toxin exposure, I will do the appropriate test for that individual. And then I will look at all of these lab tests, and then when I make recommendations for nutrition, they're at usually high levels of various nutrients that are appropriate for the detoxification efforts that we are dealing with right now. I'll always look at someone's food diary, because if you give them a bunch of supplements but you do not pay attention to their foods, that's a problem. So I always base a food plan on interviewing my clients, asking them what foods they just don't like. I don't include those ones. And which foods they do like, and the ones that I can work with there, we will do. And then I make a personalized food plan that gives them breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack, and recipe suggestions based upon their laboratory tests, the toxins, and their overall nutritional and health needs. So that will about do it. And again, I encourage you to visit my website at drmichaelwald.com. Search the podcast section or any podcast platform. Just search AskTheBloodDetective.com, and you will find much more on detoxification and whether or not you are doing the proper type of detoxification, which means you must have testing to know that what you're doing is working. You simply cannot rely on, you say to yourself, I feel better from that detoxification. That might not mean anything. All right. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate you, and I'll see you at the next podcast platform.